All right, welcome back, Jewish Roots. And tonight, we're doing something very, very, very exciting to me. Hope it's exciting to you. Atbash patterns. Atbash is the Hebrew. And what is it? What do they mean? What does it mean to us? It is also known as a chiasm. And you say, what's a chiasm? That's the Greek, because the letter X in Greek is called chi. And so it's a complex structure to where you have one thing here, and then the one under it, and then the one above it, and they're all coming to a focal point in the center where X marks the spot, where you get the Greek letter X, which is chi. And they all call it chiastic patterns, or they call them chiasms. And you have patterns like A, B, AA, BB, CC, all the way to the center. I'll explain this a little bit more as we go, but this is just the introduction. So the Atbash is the Hebrew, chiasm is the Greek. I got this from Rabbi David Fohrman and from his book, The Genesis Parsha. And in that he found, this is kind of his journey, he found in Exodus that in the latter half of the book, from chapter 25 onward, there are chiasms within chiasms. And we're going to see a couple of those in just a minute. For example, the word for assembled or gathered appears nowhere in the Torah until the people assembled as Moses goes up the mountain. In Exodus 31:1. The next time it appears is in chapter 35, verse 1. Exactly 3 chapters later, where the people gather to hear the words of the Lord. These two occurrences exactly bookend the chapters in the middle, which are about the making of the golden calf. The first occurrence is between the instructions about the Shabbat, or the Sabbath, and the calf. And the second is between the calf and the second talking about the Shabbat, or Sabbath. So in other words, the first time you see assembled or gathered, you see him making the calf, and then about the Sabbath. The second time you see the word, it's about the calf, and then you see how it's one mirrors the other, and then everything in the center. All right. He's going to explain it a whole lot better than I. And here is an example about the covenant.
Hi everybody, this is Rabbi David Fohrman, and welcome to Parshat Lech Lecha. When we think of Torah commentary, what do we think about? Usually we think about people like Rashi, the Ramban, and Sforno. But what if sometimes the Torah is its own commentary? What if the Torah uses discrete tools as a way of embedding commentary within its text? I think there are tools that the Torah uses to do just this, and one of those is what we might call an Atbash pattern. Atbash gets its name from Aleph, Taf, Beit, and Shin. The Aleph, of course, is the first letter of the alphabet, Taf, the last letter of the alphabet, Beit, the second to first letter of the alphabet, Shin, the second to last letter. And the idea here is that the Aleph, the first letter of the alphabet, is mirrored by the last letter, and the second to first letter is mirrored by the second to last letter, third to first by third to last, etc., etc. The idea here is that the Torah might use such a pattern, not just in terms of letters, but in terms of laying out larger sections of the text. So you might find yourself reading a passage in the Torah and saying, hey, you know, the first part of this passage really sounds like the last part of the passage. The second to first part of the passage really sounds like the second to last part of the passage. Academics will call this kind of Atbash pattern a chiastic structure, a chiasm. Now, why would the Torah do such a thing? I'm going to throw out a theory. The theory is that this is a way of the Torah packing a lot of meaning into a very short amount of space. There are a lot of things that a chiasm does. First of all, it points you towards the center. If you're looking at the first and last element, and then second to first, second to last, and then third to first, third to last, you're eventually converging towards the center. The Torah is defining for you a sort of center of gravity, a main idea which everything revolves around. And that's one way in which this sort of chiastic structure can work as a kind of commentary within the text. Now, this all may sound kind of abstract, so I want to actually demonstrate it to you in a little section from this week's Parsha. The section is chapter 17. It's the story of the circumcision covenant. It's the text of God's revelation of the idea of Brit Milah. Okay, so let's read the beginning of chapter 17 here. Avram is 99 years old. God comes to him and says, there's going to be a deal here. There's going to be a covenant. There are going to be obligations that God has towards Avram, obligations that Avram has towards God. In a moment, we're going to get the terms of the deal, but before we do, verse 3, Vayipol Avram al panav. Avram falls on his face. So here's the fascinating thing. Towards the end of this chapter, you're going to find this very same phrase, Vayipol Avram al panav, again. Very interesting. It turns out that this is the beginning of a chiastic structure, this sort of Atbash pattern. Because right after Vayipol Avram al panav, what's the next thing that happens? Look at verse 4. Verse 4 says, Hine briti itcha, God says, my covenant's going to be with you, and you're going to be the father of many nations. So that's what happens right after what we might call the orange element. Let's call it this orange, Vayipol Avram al panav. Right after that, we'll get to what we might call the yellow element, which is you're going to be the father of many nations. Well, is there a yellow element right before the orange at the bottom of the chiasm? Turns out there is. Not only is Avram going to be the father of many nations, but Sarah, his wife, is going to be the mother of many nations. Okay, so we've got an orange element, a yellow element. We have another element. We do, let's call it the green element, the third element of the chiasm. You'll see it in verse 5, the next verse. Name change. Lo yikare odet shimcha Avram. Your name is not going to be Avram anymore. Your name is going to be Avraham. Wouldn't you know it? The third element of the chiasm mirrors itself at the bottom, and it's name change for Sarah. Vayomer Elokim al Avram, Sarai ishtacha. Sarai is not going to be Sarai anymore. She's going to be called Sarah. She's not just your princess, she's the princess of the world. Okay, take a look at the very next word, right after these first three elements. Verse 6, Vihifreti. Interesting. Do you see any analog for that at the bottom of the chiasm? Oh, look at that. The word hafer. Hifreti, hafer, is the same letters, hey, pei, resh. Interestingly, the same letters with opposite meanings. Hifreti means I will multiply you. Hafer means to utterly nullify. Look at the larger element, the fourth element. What else happens here? Hifreti otcha b'ma'od ma'od, verse 6. I'm going to multiply you greatly, God says. I'm going to make you into nations, and kings will come for you. Really three ideas. The idea is not only you're going to have lots of children, but they're going to coalesce into a nation, and the nation is going to be governed by kings, that there's actually going to be one autonomous body, one body, that all of these individuals are part of, and not just individuals. Now look at the fourth to last element. Anybody who doesn't observe the covenant, any male that doesn't circumcise himself, the nichrata nefesh ha'imameh is going to be cut off from your people. So the fourth element at the beginning is, individuals are not just individuals, they're going to be part of a collective. But the fourth to last element is, but if you don't keep the brit, you're not part of the collective. You're cut off from the cloud, you're cut off from the whole. Et briti afer, because you violated, nullified the covenant. So I'll multiply you, and those individuals come together, but if any individual nullifies the covenant, they're not part of the collective. And by the way, this is one way in which Jewish nationhood is different than every other nation. You see, every other nation just comes about by happenstance. It's a king just manages to conquer land, and people aggregate around him for self-protection and things like that. But the Jewish nation is a nation because God created this nation. And this brit, this deal, this covenant is at the center of it all. If you violate the covenant, your claim to be part of the nation is just going to fall apart. The covenant is essential to nationhood. Let's look at the next element. Verse 7, Vakimoti et briti bencha ben zaracha. I'm going to establish my covenant with you. It'll be a covenant forever. Look at now the fifth to last element. Himo yimo yilid beitcha, v'haita briti gubsarchem librit olam. Again, the idea of an everlasting covenant. I will establish the covenant, and that's going to last forever. And then having established it, this covenant is going to be visible in your flesh. It's going to be a part of your bodies, and it'll be that way forever within the corpus of the nation. As you can see, we're getting closer and closer towards the center of this text. The next thing you're going to see is absolutely wild. You're going to see a chiasm within a chiasm, a little Atbash within the larger Atbash. Liot l'cha le'elokim, I'm going to be your God, l'zaracha achrecha, the God not just for you, but for your progeny after you. V'natati l'cha l'zaracha achrecha eretz migrach, I'm going to give you this land, I'm going to give you Eretz Canaan forever. Vayiti lehem le'elokim, and I'm going to be for your children a God. Now look at that carefully. What are the ideas? There's three ideas here. Idea number one, I'm going to be a God for you and for your children. Idea number 3 is the same thing. I'm going to be a God for your children. And in the middle of that, sandwiched between those two, is I'm going to give you the land. Lo and behold, you have exactly the same structure at the bottom of the chiasm. The next element has that same threefold structure. Unemaltem et basar lotechem. You have to do milah. You have to circumcise. Element A. Element B. V'haya la'ot brit beinu beinechem. And it's going to be a sign of the covenant. Element C. Ben shmod yam yimo lachem. You must circumcise all males on the 8th day. Do you see it? Element A. Circumcise. Element C. Circumcise. Right there in the middle, and it will be a sign of the covenant between us. So you have these two little mini chiasms mirroring each other. And interestingly, the centers kind of connect, don't they? What is it that God is promising Avram in his part of the deal? God is really promising two things. Children which will coalesce into a nation, and land for the nation to live in. Now remember we saw earlier in the chiasm how the promise of children coalescing into a nation was dependent upon the Brit. You couldn't imagine the nation without the Brit, such that any person that didn't observe the Brit will be cut out of the nation. Now you see, it's the same thing for land. The centers of these two chiasms, they mirror each other, and what's the center about? The center at the top of the chiasm is, I'm going to give you land, but what's the center at the bottom of the chiasm? But you're going to keep the Brit. Message, the land is dependent upon the Brit. Just as the same way as children coalescing into nations is dependent upon a Brit, the promise of land is dependent upon keeping the Brit as well. Which is why, by the way, that in Sefer Yoshua, before the Jews actually come into the land, what did they make sure to do? Everyone stops. And any children who were born and not yet circumcised are circumcised. You don't go into the land without that. Both great promises, children and land, are somehow tied to this essential covenant between God and Abraham's people. Finally, we're ready for the center of the chiasm. The center is kind of a double center, and it's the primacy of the covenant, the atet briti tishmor. And you make sure to keep my covenant. Zod briti asher tishmor. This is my covenant that you should keep. The centrality, the need to keep the covenant, is the central idea which all of this revolves around. And this covenant, this deal, God's obligation towards us and our reciprocal obligation towards Him is that which begins our existence as a nation. It's all predicated on this. Shabbat Shalom to all of you.
How everything, they were color-coded, yellow, yellow, blue, blue, green, green, orange, orange, whatever, and how this one mirrored this one, but what they said all went toward the center, and the center was the covenant. And you see how everything that was said up until the center confirmed and supported the covenant. That you see what I'm talking about? How did you see that? That's something you're probably not going to see unless you really dig or get with someone who knows what chiasms are, but that is something that's why I wanted to present it to you, and I was excited about it because I want to show you more evidence of what he just laid out. Are you ready for more? Or do you want to digest that for a little bit? Let's go. All right. I want to show you that the Torah is 5 books. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. What's in the middle? Which book is in the middle? Leviticus. So if you're going to have a chiasm of the whole Torah, that was just from a verse. That was Genesis, what was it, 17, if I remember correctly? Yes. That was just from Genesis 17. But let's look at the Torah as a whole. You got 5 books, and as a chiasm, or Atbash, watch this. Here is, you have Genesis, Exodus, no Leviticus, it's in the center, and then Numbers and Deuteronomy. I presented this a long time ago. In Genesis, watch this. If you go to the first letter T, what we would say T is Tav, which is the very last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The first Tav is in Genesis 1:1, it's in the Bereshit. And the end of the word Bereshit is a Tav. You count 49 letters after that, you'll come to the Vav. 49 letters after that, you come to the Resh. 49 letters after that, you come to the He. Tav, Vav, Resh, He is Torah. Why 49? What is significant about 49? How many years until Jubilee? 49. 7 times 7, and then the 49th, and the 50th year is Jubilee. Messiah represents Jubilee. So after the 49 comes Jubilee. So wouldn't you know it, that if that's in Genesis, then the last one should have the same thing. You have Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. Deuteronomy should have the same thing. So in Deuteronomy, you go to the first Tav. Or no, it's actually backwards. You go to the first He. This is Deuteronomy 1:1. Count 49 letters. Count 49 letters, and it's Torah backwards, in reverse. So Genesis is Torah forwards. Deuteronomy is Torah backwards.
This is looking to Leviticus.
Exodus has the same exact thing. Here's the first Tav. Count 49 letters. Torah. Numbers, same thing, backwards. Right? So you have the same thing. You have A, B, B. What's in the middle? C. Wow, what could it be? Leviticus. There we go. Yay, Leviticus is in the center. I found Leviticus. Watch this. The Torah points to itself. The Torah is an Atbash. You have Genesis and Deuteronomy, forwards, backwards. Exodus, Numbers, forward, backwards. What's in Leviticus? What's in the center? Guess what?
Yahweh.
If you go to the first Yud in Leviticus, 7 letters in is a Yud. 7 letters later is a He. 7 letters later is a Vav. 7 letters later is a He. The name of God. In the middle. So that Genesis and Exodus points toward the middle. Numbers and Deuteronomy points back toward the middle. Do you see what I'm saying? Is that so? The Torah itself is pointing toward the middle, which is the Messiah. That's an Atbash of the Torah itself. What about, let's take a deeper look at the book of Leviticus. Since it's in the middle, there's got to be something to it, would you not say? Oh, well, maybe I can get this. There we go. So, here is the whole book of Leviticus chaptered out. Chapters 1 through 7 is Israel draws near to God. There's offerings and sacrifices. Chapters 8 through 10 is the priesthood established, those who will lead the worship. 11 through 15 is help for God's people, the clean and unclean animals, blah, blah, blah. 16, Day of Atonement. All right, so let's keep going. 17 through 22 is holiness for God's people, what is holy, what is common. 23 to 25 is how the priests were to conduct themselves, the worship and the worship service. And 26 to 27 is how Israel is to live with God in punishments and vows. Do you see a chiastic or an Atbash pattern within the whole book of Leviticus itself? And what's in the center of it all? Atonement. What was the whole thing of Leviticus about? The Messiah. That all pointed to the name of God, that all points toward the atonement, all points toward the Messiah. So the whole book of Leviticus itself is an Atbash pattern. Now you see why I was excited for this. Is that not crazy? But wait, there's more. What's in the middle of the Torah? What's the dead smack center of the Torah? Here it is. The Vav is in the dead smack center. Vav is the Hebrew letter for in the middle of the Torah. It means connection, a connection to the Messiah for the atonement and redemption, the Lamb that takes away the sins of the world. Here is the word, here is the Vav. If you count every single letter in the Torah and go backwards and forwards, it points to this word right here, and it's the Vav, and it's the connection. So the dead smack center of the Torah is a Vav that connects the front and the back, Jew, Gentile. Are you seeing this?
Yeah.
But wait, there's more. Isn't it interesting, at the very middle letter of the Torah, this word means belly. Alright? And in the middle of the human body is
The belly.
the belly that connects the top and the bottom. And guess what else the belly does? It supports everything that this does. Right? In the Old Testament and New Testament, there are Atbash patterns to themselves, pointing to the middle, which is the connection of both through the redemption of Yeshua, the Vav. Yeshua is the Vav that connects everything, the old and the new. The Vav is in the center. And isn't it wild that the word that Vav in is belly, that's in the center of it all? Now you see why I said there's no way that Steven Spielberg or anybody could invent anything like this. Are you excited yet? Should we go on? Now you have to contain yourself here. All right. I'm going to show you a chiasm in the prophets. We saw the Torah, which is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Let's look at the prophets. Here's Joel. Joel chapter 3. 17 to 21. So you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who dwells in Zion, my holy mountain. And Jerusalem shall be holy, strangers shall never again pass through it. And in that day the mountains shall drip with sweet wine, and the hills shall flow with milk, and all the stream beds of Judah shall flow with water. The fountain shall come forth in the house of the Lord, and the waters from the valley of Shittim. Egypt shall become a desolation, Edom, a desolate wilderness, for violence done to the people of Judah, because they have shed innocent blood in their land. But Judah shall be inhabited forever, Jerusalem to all generations. I will avenge their blood. I have not avenged, for the Lord dwells in Zion. I gave you the first one. Is there an Atbash pattern here? I gave you the first one in yellow. Verse 17, verse 21, the Lord your God who dwells in Zion, Lord dwells in Zion. Now, are there any more? Maybe. Obviously, since that's why we're here. Jerusalem shall be holy. Judah shall be inhabited forever, and Jerusalem to all generations. So Jerusalem shall be holy for all generations. And here Judah is part of that, because Jerusalem is in Judea. Right, it was part of Judah. Any more?
I see green lines over there.
So here it is. Green. Strangers shall never again pass through it. Talking about Jerusalem. Egypt shall become a desolation, and Edom desolate wilderness. It means their enemies are going to be no more, and strangers will never pass through it again, because all their enemies are gone. You see that connection? And then the center is stream beds of Judah shall flow with water. The fountain shall come forth from the house of the Lord. Okay, it says, of Judah shall flow water. What did Jesus, Yeshua, claim to be? I am the living water fountain. And he was from the tribe of Judah. So do you see the Atbash pattern in Joel chapter 3? It comes to a climax or point in the center. That Jerusalem and God's holy place is going to be flowing with life. And that's why Jesus said, I am life, living water. So that's in Joel, right? Is it possible there's one in the book of John? The Gospel of John. Is it possible? Well, of course, that's why we're here. But is it possible? Those are in the Old Testament. What would be the odds of it being in the New Testament? Because if it's there, if you have Old and New, they should mirror each other. So the whole Old and New should be Atbash in itself, because one mirrors the other. So in the Gospel of John, yes. Let's look at this. Here is John chapter 5, verses 19 through 29. All right? Well, actually 30. I'm sorry. That's a typo. It goes to 30. Jesus said to them, Truly, truly, I say to you, the Son can do nothing on his own accord, but only what he sees the Father doing. For whatever the Father does, the Son does likewise. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all that he himself is doing, and greater works than these will he show him, so that you may marvel. For the Father raises the dead and gives them life, so also the Son gives life to whom he will. For the Father judges no one, but has given all judgment to the Son, that all may honor the Son, just as they honor the Father. Whoever does not honor the Son does not honor the Father, who sent him. Truly I say to you, whoever hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life. He does not come into judgment, but is passed from death to life. Truly I say to you, an hour is coming and is here now, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. For as the Father has life in himself, so has he granted the Son also to have life in himself. He has given him authority to execute judgment, because he's the Son of Man. Do not marvel at this, for an hour is coming when all who are in the tombs will hear his voice and come out. Those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of judgment. I can do nothing of my own accord. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is just, because I seek not my own will, but the will of him who sent me. So here's the passage. What's the first Atbash pattern?
I can do nothing on my own.
The Son can do nothing on his own. I can do nothing on my own. Very good. Is there another one? If you can read the blue.
For as the Father raises the dead, it gives them life.
Dang, girl. How'd you do that?
Well, I counted how many rows down.
Oh, okay, good girl.
So the blue. I'm kind of doing it as Rabbi Fohrman. I'm color coding it like he did. For as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, so also the Son gives life. And in verse 29, and come out for those who have done good to the resurrection of life. Do you see the match? All right, is there, let's go on. This is in verse 24, has eternal life, passed from death to life. Eternal life, death to life, and guess what? There's your center. The whole message of the book of John, the Gospel of John, is to show that he is the Messiah and that he gives life. So you have all of this pointing to that central theme that says, whoever hears my word and believes has eternal life. And you pass from death to life. So you see that in the book of John. I'm sure there's many more, I just haven't discovered them yet. So you see why I was excited when I first saw this. I saw this in the Old Testament, I was like, that's really cool. But when you see it in the New Testament, you're like, oh. And they should mirror each other, the old and the new. And I'm sure they do, I just haven't got around to them yet. So.
Well, there's more than that.
Oh, I'm sure there's a whole lot more. This is what I was talking about earlier in Deuteronomy 17:6. On the evidence of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses, the one who is to die shall be put to death. A person shall not be put to death on the evidence of just 1 witness. And there's more about that. This is the legal system in Deuteronomy. That, like I said before, when you bring an accusation or you bring a matter, that there has to be 2 or more witnesses in order for it to be validated. That's the whole purpose of the Atbash patterns, is they validate each other to a central theme. In other words, the Torah, like we saw, all validated itself, pointed toward the name of God, atonement. The New Testament validates itself because Jesus says, hey, look, this is my word. Not only is it my word, but the Father. And he says the Father testifies to the Son, and the Son testifies to the Father. There's 2 witnesses. These 2 witness to each other of their own authority and power. The Torah witnesses about itself through Atbash patterns. The Word testifies about itself in the Torah and the New Testament. Now, what I just read to you, John chapter 5 at the end, starting at verse 36, he says, the testimony I have is greater than that of John. John who? John the Baptist. For the works that the Father has given me to accomplish, the very works that I'm doing, bear witness about me, that the Father has sent me. 37. And the Father who sent me has himself borne witness about me. And in verse 39, he's talking to the religious leaders. You search the Scriptures because you think that in them, in the Torah, you have life. And it is they that bear witness about me. Yet you refuse to come to me that you may have life. Woo, he's digging hard, and he's giving it to them right between the eyes. He's saying, you have the Torah thinking that gives you life, but I'm here with you right now telling you that I'm the life, and you can't see it and you don't accept it. And I've given you all this. And 1 John, and I'm going to have to look it up, where it says the 3 bear witness, the water, the blood, and the Spirit. So there's the 3 witnesses that bear witness. So the Atbash patterns, the chiasms, whatever you want to call it, all bear witness. That's why I said before, you can't have 5, 10, 20, however many authors there are to the Bible, the whole Bible, and have this many Atbash patterns in it and say it's not inspired. When people say, oh, there was just people, just men that wrote it. Yes, but there's no way they could go through all this intricately and compile that big of a book and have it go that exact. There's just no way a man can do that without being inspired. And when you show them these chiasms, these Atbash patterns, it proves that the inspiration, because it testifies of its own self. The Torah testifies to itself. The New Testament testifies to itself. Jesus testifies to himself through the Father and the Spirit. Does that all make sense? All right. So now you know why I was excited about the Atbash patterns.